Hey everybody, this is Alex Merced from alexmercedcoder.com, and this video is going to be about data, basically moving data or data flow in component-based design. So nowadays, and this applies to Angular, Vue, React, Svelte, using web components. So however you decide to do component-based design, this should be valuable to understand, okay? Because the way component-based design is, whether you're using React, Angular, Vue, etc., what you're doing is you're creating these encapsulated pieces of your UI. And one component can be rendered inside of another component, but this always creates a situation of rendering your data. You could just literally build your whole app in one component, but then why did you need components in the first place? This isn't really, the whole point was to have these sort of walled gardens of your UI that you could reuse. So you make a fancy button, you can reuse it again. You create a slider, you can use it again. You create a form, you can use it again, because you designed it in an encapsulated way. That's sort of the benefit. But it does create challenges in trying to share data between components. So first, let's just kind of paint the picture of sort of how components relate to each other. So whether it's Angular, Vue, or React, generally always starts off with your index.html, and there's some sort of mechanism that injects the parent component for everybody, usually referred to as app. So there's always like an app component, and that's kind of your starting place. And then you have all your other components inside the app component. So you might have like a component for the top of your page, which is called top. This is an example. And then inside that top has like a navigation component and a hero component. Then you have like the middle of your page and the footer or bottom of the page. But these are other components that are built inside. And usually sending data down, so sending data from app to these, pretty straightforward. Sending from data from top to navigation hero. Where it gets a little complicated is sending data up, because data tends to move downwards. Okay, the idea is that the child is inside of the parent, so the child has a hard way. Basically, the parent can pass data to the child, but the child doesn't see the component that created it typically. So there's got to be some sort of mechanism So again, when you're doing it from parent to child, it's pretty straightforward. Okay, whether it's Angular, React, or Vue, you do props. It's not always called props, but essentially your components will have the ability to enter properties in the tag for your component, and you can send data down. Okay, so you sit there and say, hey, my component has this data, I'm sending it down to this component right there. Okay, you just add these little props to your tag. Okay, and if you've done any of these libraries, this should seem very familiar. Okay, if you've built components and whatnot. But when it comes to sending data up, in React, the mechanism for sending sort of the ability to send data back up is you have to pass down like arrow functions. So generally what you do is you send a function as a prop. So in this example, I'm sending this arrow function down as a prop, and then what it does, it just runs a set state function. But because I defined this function in the parent component, it's scoped to the parent. So I'm basically sending a piece of the parent scope down to the child that gives me some access to the data inside the parent. So the child still can't see the parent, but the functions that I sent down can. Okay, so I'm sending down these arrow functions that run functions that are inside the parent. Usually you don't send the function directly down there. I wouldn't just like send set state down there. Usually that would cause errors, especially with hooks. So instead what I do is I send a function that runs the function. Now in Vue and Angular, so let me just duplicate this slide. In Vue and Angular, if you want to send data up, it's a little bit different. You don't send a function down, okay? You can't really pass the scope in that manner. What you have to do is you have to emit an event. And then the parent can then listen for the event. Okay, so essentially passing data through props goes down the element tree, but then events bubble up. So if you know anything about event bubbling, what it does is that you can imagine these layers of components that are on top of each other. If a child triggers an event, the parent of that element can hear the event, and then the parent of that element can hear the event, and it bubbles all the way up to the body. So in that case, the parent elements can then listen for that event. Okay, so in Vue, it would look something like this. This is my component, and I would say something like @click. So when a click event happens, or not at click, I would say like at event name. So you'd have like a custom event name saying like, logged in as your event name. And then I would then have like function, and I would pass in the event data into that function. So so basically, let's say I have like a login form component. Someone logs in, and then I get like back a JOT token, JWT JOT token. I get that token back from the response. I then package that in the event, and that event bubbles up, so that way my app component can then like send all the other components the information that this user's logged in, send them the JOT tokens, make that stuff available. So component at event name. But again, the idea is instead what you're doing is you have an event trigger up, and it triggers a function in the parent components that then update the data. So I'm not sending a function down like React that when it gets triggered updates the data that from the parent. What I'm doing is I have an event that bubbles up that triggers a function in the parent component. Now Angular does have a couple other tools like viewChild and other things that you can do to trigger the component. Actually, I have an article about that open up right now, so let me show you that. Okay, so like this is like what I'm talking about, where you can emit an event. So this is how it would look like in Angular. So the child component would emit an event, and then the parent component would then listen for the event. So right here we're saying, hey, when the event happens, run this function. Okay, but they also have this thing called viewChild, where you can literally have access to the child's data. So it actually completely exposes the child, so I thought that was kind of interesting. Okay. And then also Angular has the ability to use Rxjs observables to share data between unrelated components. So not just between data and parent, but two components that have no relationship with each other. Okay, so that's something I think, I don't know if anything like that exists. I mean, you could bring in Rxjs observables as an external library in React and Vue, but Angular has that built in. So hopefully, again, it's just thinking about how these components are related. So again, these parent, child, siblings. Okay. And this is going to help you kind of think through, what do I need to do to get the data that I need where I need it? Who is the child of who? How do parents send data? Props. How do children send data? Either through a function that was passed by the parent in React, or via an event that's emitted in Angular and Vue. But once you know what that mechanism is, then you just use the right mechanism to send the data in the direction you want to send it in. Okay, notice in React, even when the child wants to send data up, you're still passing down, because React really, again, is really trying to be functional. It really doesn't want you to pass data up. It really rather the data go in one direction. But it is possible. It is doable. So hopefully you found this interesting, sort of in thinking through these libraries. My name is Alex Merced from alexmercedcoder.com. Have a great day and enjoy.